The stars had never looked so crowded before that day in September, when 10,000 alien warships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system and blocked out the light from distant galaxies like a curtain of metal. And Fire Ambassador Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue planet that hung in the darkness of space like a fragile marble. And he felt nothing but confidence, because in all his centuries of service to the Galactic Concordat, no species had ever refused their demands. The Concordat was an alliance of 47 advanced alien species that had ruled the galaxy for longer than humans had existed. And they had a simple way of dealing with new civilizations. Submit or burn. Veltar was a tall creature with silver scales and forearms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through steel. And his species had been warriors for millions of years before humans had learned to walk upright. So he expected this conquest to be quick and easy. He activated the communication systems and broadcast his message to every screen and speaker and radio on Earth. Attention! Primitive species of the third planet. His voice echoed across continents and oceans. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Concordat, and I bring you an ultimatum that you will obey without question or hesitation. He paused to let the fear sink in before continuing. You have 48 of your planet's rotations to surrender all military assets, accept protectorate status under Concordat rule, and submit to our authority in all matters. And if you refuse, your cities will burn, and your species will become a footnote in galactic history. To make his point clear, Veltar transmitted footage of other civilizations that had refused the Concordat's generous offer, and the images showed planets turned to glass and species reduced to ashes. And he was certain that humans would be terrified on Earth. The message was received by the United Earth Defense Council in Geneva, where 50 of humanity's most powerful leaders gathered around a massive table and watched the alien ambassador threaten their entire species. General Marcus Webb was a man of 63 years with gray hair and scars from 3 different wars. And he had seen enough death and destruction to fill several lifetimes, but instead of fear, his face showed something that looked almost like amusement. Defense Coordinator Sarah Chun sat next to him with her arms crossed and a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. And she had spent her entire career preparing for exactly this moment. Well, she said to the room, I guess all those alien invasion movies finally paid off. Several people laughed. And the alien delegation watching through their monitors was confused, because this was not how conquered species were supposed to react. Veltar as second in command, a psychic being named Threll, who could read emotions across vast distances, suddenly felt something strange coming from the human leaders. And it was not fear or panic or despair, but something that felt dangerously close to excitement. Ambassador, Thrall said with worry in his voice, something is wrong with these creatures because they do not seem afraid at all. Veltar dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand, because he had seen species pretend to be brave before they crumbled. And he was certain humans would be no different. The human leaders requested a face-to-face meeting to discuss terms, and Veltar agreed because he enjoyed watching lesser species beg for mercy in person. So they arranged to meet on a small space station that humans had constructed in just 3 days. When the alien delegation arrived, they expected to find trembling diplomats ready to surrender. But instead they found a conference room with comfortable chairs and a table covered with pastries and something called coffee that humans seemed to drink constantly. Sarah Chun stood up to greet them with a warm smile and an outstretched hand. And Veltar was so confused by her friendly demeanor that he almost forgot to be intimidating. Welcome to the meeting, Ambassador Veltar, she said cheerfully. Can I offer you some coffee, or perhaps a donut, before we discuss the terms of your surrender? Velktar's scales turned a darker shade of silver, which was a sign of anger among his species. Our surrender? He hissed with disbelief. You misunderstand the situation, human, because it is you who will be surrendering to us. And I suggest you take this seriously before we demonstrate the full power of our fleet. General Webb leaned back in his chair and took a long sip of his coffee before speaking. Ambassador, we have received your ultimatum and reviewed your impressive collection of destroyed planets. And we have discussed the matter thoroughly among ourselves. And what is your decision? Velktar demanded. Webb looked at Chun, and Chun looked at the other human delegates. And then they all did something that made absolutely no sense to the aliens. They laughed, not nervous laughter or hysterical laughter, but genuine, deep, amused laughter, as if Velktar had told them the funniest joke in the universe. I apologize, Chun said while wiping tears from her eyes. That was unprofessional of us. But you have to understand how this looks from our perspective. Velktar slammed all four of his fists on the table with enough force to crack the surface. Explain yourselves immediately. He roared. Do you not understand that we have 10,000 warships armed with weapons that could destroy your planet 100 times over? Oh, we understand perfectly, Webb said with a grin that showed too many teeth. We just think it is adorable that you believe that matters. The aliens exchanged worried glances because this was not going according to plan at all. And Thrall's psychic senses were now screaming warnings that he could not fully understand. Let me ask you something. Ambassador, Chun said as she stood up and walked around the table. How much do you actually know about humanity? Velktar scoffed at the question. We know everything we need to know about your primitive species, because our scouts have observed you for years. And you are violent and chaotic and barely capable of basic space travel. Violent and chaotic, Chun repeated with a nod. Yes, that is accurate. But I wonder if you understand what that actually means. She pressed a button and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. You see, Ambassador, you are not the first existential threat humanity has faced. And you are certainly not the scariest. Impossible, Velktar declared. No force in this galaxy is greater than the Concordat. Webb stood up and walked over to stand next to Chun with his hands clasped behind his back. Ambassador Velktar, have you ever heard the human expression around and find out? Velktar did not understand the phrase, but something about the way the humans were smiling made his scales itch with an unfamiliar sensation. That might have been the beginning of doubt. Chun leaned forward with her eyes locked on the alien ambassador. You came here expecting to terrify us into submission, but you have no idea what you have walked into. And before you make any decisions you will regret, let me give you a brief history lesson about the species you are threatening. She smiled again. And this time, there was something sharp and dangerous hiding behind her friendly expression. Because I promise you, Ambassador, by the time I am finished, you will understand exactly why we are laughing. Ambassador Velktar sat in his chair with all four arms crossed and his silver scales still dark with anger as he waited for the humans to explain themselves. Because in all his centuries of conquering worlds, he had never encountered a species arrogant enough to laugh at the Concordat's power. Sarah Chun stood before the holographic display with the calm confidence of a professor about to deliver her favorite lecture. And she could feel the confusion radiating from the alien delegation like heat from a dying star. Ambassador, she began, your scouts observed humanity for years and concluded that we are primitive and violent and chaotic. And you are absolutely correct about all of those things. But what you failed to understand is that those are not weaknesses. She pressed a button and the display lit up with images from human history. Let me show you what humanity has been doing for the past 10,000 years while you were busy conquering other species. The first images showed ancient battlefields covered with bodies and weapons made of bronze and iron. and the aliens watched with mild interest because warfare was common among developing species. These are our earliest recorded wars, Chun explained. And humans have been killing each other in organized conflicts since before we invented writing. So we actually developed better ways to kill each other before we developed better ways to communicate. General Webb chuckled at that observation because he had always found it darkly amusing. The images shifted to show trenches filled with mud and bodies and barbed wire stretching across blasted landscapes. This was called the First World War. Chun continued, and it happened about 200 years ago when humanity decided to fight each other using poison gas and machine guns and artillery that could level entire cities. And by the end of it, 20 million humans were dead. Veltar's translator had difficulty with the number, so he asked for clarification. 20 million of your own species? In a single conflict? That was just the first one, Webb said with a dark smile. The second one was worse. The display showed cities in flames and mushroom clouds rising over. Ruined landscapes and armies of millions clashing across continents. The Second World War killed approximately 70 million humans, Chun said casually, and it ended when we invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single explosion. And then we used those weapons ourselves just to prove we would do it. The alien delegation shifted uncomfortably in their seats because these numbers were beyond anything they had expected from a species they considered primitive. Threll, the psychic, was feeling waves of emotion from the humans that he could not properly interpret. And the closest translation would be something like pride mixed with dark humor after that war ended. Chen continued. Humanity entered a period called the Cold War where two major powers pointed enough nuclear weapons at each other to destroy our entire planet several times over. And we lived like that for decades while constantly preparing for extinction. You threatened to destroy yourselves completely? One of the alien scientists asked with disbelief. Threatened and prepared for it, Webb confirmed. We built bunkers deep underground and stockpiled supplies and created detailed plans for surviving and rebuilding after nuclear apocalypse. And some humans even looked forward to it as an exciting challenge. Chun pulled up more statistics on the display. During the Cold War era, humanity detonated over 2,000 nuclear weapons on our own planet, just for testing purposes, and we did this while knowing full well that we were poisoning our own environment and increasing cancer rates among our own population. Loktar tried to process this information because it contradicted everything he knew about rational species. That is insane. He finally declared, absolutely. Chun agreed without hesitation. Humanity is completely insane by galactic standards. And that is precisely why you should be worried. She changed the display to show images of Earth's environment. Let me tell you about our home world, Ambassador, because I think you will find it illuminating, the images showed. Volcanic eruptions and earthquakes and hurricanes and wildfires and floods and every other natural disaster imaginable. Earth is what scientists would classify as a death world. Chen explained. Our gravity is 20% higher than the galactic average. Our star produces mutagenic radiation that causes cancer. Our weather patterns can kill in minutes. And our ecosystem evolved everything to kill everything else. Webb took over the explanation. On Earth, even the plants are dangerous, and we have trees that explode, flowers that eat insects, and fungi that can control the minds of other organisms. Our oceans are filled with creatures that have multiple rows of teeth and hunt anything that moves. Chen added, and our land animals include predators that can run faster than ground vehicles and insects that kill more humans every year than all our wars combined. Thrall was now trembling because he was beginning to understand something terrible about the creatures sitting across the table from him. But the most dangerous thing on Earth, Chung said with obvious pride, is humanity itself, because we evolved alongside all these horrors, and we not only survived, but thrived. She showed images of human biology. Humans are persistence predators, which means our ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. And we can walk and run for days without stopping if necessary. Our bodies can heal from injuries that would kill most species. Webb continued. We can lose limbs and continue fighting. We can function on minimal sleep for extended periods. And our pain tolerance is considered abnormal by galactic standards. We also have an unusual response to fear. Chun explained. Most species have a survival instinct that tells them to run from danger. But humans have something different. And we call it the fight-or-flight response, except in our case, it is heavily weighted toward fight. She smiled that dangerous smile again. When humans encounter something terrifying, our first instinct is often to attack it. Voktar was silent for a long moment as he processed all this information. But surely your violence is directed at yourselves. He finally said, your history proves that humans prefer to fight each other. That is true. Webb acknowledged, but it also means we have been practicing warfare for our entire existence. And we have developed fighting into an art form. Chun pulled up one final set of images showing human entertainment. This is how humans relax. Ambassador, and we watch stories about apocalypse and invasion and disaster for fun. And our most popular entertainment often involves simulated violence and destruction. Our children play games where they pretend to fight wars. Webb added, and when they grow up, many of them join organizations specifically designed to fight and kill, and they do this voluntarily. We have a phrase, Chun said, that roughly translates to hold my beer, which is what humans say before attempting something incredibly dangerous and stupid. And this phrase is considered funny rather than concerning. Voktar stood up abruptly with his scales, flickering between colors that indicated confusion and something that might have been fear. This is all very interesting, he said with forced confidence. But it changes nothing, because you may be violent and insane. But we have 10,000 warships and weapons that your primitive technology cannot match. Chun and Webb exchanged a look that conveyed entire conversations without words. You still do not understand. Chun said softly, we are not trying to scare you with stories of our past violence. Then what is your purpose? Voktar demanded. Webb walked over to stand directly in front of the alien ambassador. Ambassador, everything we have told you about human history and biology and psychology is leading to one simple point. He leaned in close enough that Voktar could smell something strange on his breath. There was probably that coffee drink. We have been preparing for you for 80 years. Voktar stepped back involuntarily. Impossible. You did not know we existed until today. We did not know you specifically existed. Chun corrected him. But we knew something like you would come eventually. And humanity has been preparing for alien invasion since before we left our own planet. She smiled with all the warmth of a predator closing in for the kill. Your ultimatum demanded we surrender within 48 hours. But we are going to give you a counteroffer, and you have 24 hours to withdraw your fleet from our solar system completely. Or what? Voktar asked. Despite himself, General Webb answered with a phrase that needed no translation, or, you will find out exactly what happens when you threaten a species that has been trying to kill itself for 10,000 years, and still has not succeeded. 23 hours after the humans delivered their impossible counter-ultimatum, Ambassador Voktar stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched with satisfaction as the Concordat fleet moved into attack position around the small blue planet called Earth. He had reported to Fleet Commander Zek Thorol that the humans were suffering from what he called Death World-induced psychosis and would surely surrender once they witnessed the true power of the Armada. And the commander had agreed that a demonstration of force would break their strange confidence. Deploy the Vanguard. Thorel ordered through the communication channel. 500 ships should be more than enough to convince these primitives of their situation. The Vanguard fleet separated from the main armada and began its approach toward Earth with weapons charged and shields at full power. And every ship was crewed by warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds without ever losing a battle. But as the Vanguard crossed an invisible line near the orbit of Mars, something unexpected happened. Warning alarms began screaming across every ship simultaneously as sensors detected thousands of objects suddenly appearing from what had seemed like empty space. And before anyone could react, the first tungsten rods traveling at 5% the speed of light slammed into the lid ships. The energy shields that had never failed against any weapon in the galaxy flickered and died because they were designed to dissipate energy weapons and plasma cannons, not simple metal projectiles moving faster than any defensive system could track. 50 ships exploded in the first 3 seconds of the engagement. What is happening? Velktar screamed as his bridge shook from nearby explosions. Unknown weapons. A tactical officer shouted back. They appear to be primitive kinetic projectiles, but they are moving at relativistic speeds, and our shields cannot stop them. The humans had been waiting for this moment for decades, all across the solar system. What had appeared to be defunct satellites and abandoned space stations and innocent asteroid mining operations suddenly came alive with weapons that had been hidden in plain sight for years. The moon revealed itself as a massive military installation with railguns, capable of launching projectiles across the entire solar system. And Mars colonies that had seemed like peaceful settlements opened their hangars to release swarms of armed spacecraft. They were prepared for us. Thrall whispered with horror as his psychic senses were overwhelmed by the focused aggression radiating from millions of humans who were finally getting the fight they had been training for on Earth. Admiral Yuki Tanaka coordinated the defense from a command center buried deep beneath a mountain that humans had hollowed out specifically for this purpose. And she watched the battle unfold on screens that showed every corner of the solar system. Phase 1 complete. She announced to her staff, "The Vanguard has been engaged and is taking heavy losses. So proceed to Phase 2 and show them what happens when they enter our territory uninvited." The asteroid belt that had seemed like a natural feature of the solar system suddenly became a nightmare for the Concordat fleet as they discovered that humans had spent 50 years repositioning asteroids and loading them with explosives and guidance systems. Massive rocks began accelerating toward the alien ships like guided missiles the size of mountains. And the aliens had no weapons designed to destroy something that large moving that fast. Retreat, the Vanguard commander ordered. But it was already too late for many of his ships. Back on the flagship, Velktar was demanding answers. How is this possible? Our scouts reported that humans had barely achieved basic space travel. Fleet Commander Thorel appeared on the communication screen with an expression that Velktar had never seen before, and it looked almost like uncertainty. "It appears the humans deceived our scouts," the commander said grimly. Their civilian space program was a cover for massive military preparations, and they have been building weapons we did not know were possible. But they are primitives. Velktar protested. Primitives who just destroyed 100 of our ships in the first engagement. Thorel replied coldly on Earth. Admiral Tanaka was receiving reports from every sector of the defense network. "The Vanguard is retreating," her tactical officer reported. "But the main fleet is moving to intercept." "Good," Tanaka said with a smile that would have frightened the aliens if they could see it. "They are doing exactly what we expected. So activate the network and show them what human ingenuity looks like when we have decades to prepare." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. Every ship in the Concordat fleet suddenly experienced simultaneous system failures as their computers were infected by programs that had been planted weeks earlier by human hackers who had infiltrated their networks. During the initial communication exchanges, lights flickered, and life support systems glitched, and navigation computers started reporting that ships were in completely wrong locations. And the aliens realized with growing horror that they had been compromised from the moment they first made contact with Earth. "We are inside your systems now," Admiral Tanaka broadcast to the entire fleet. "Every ship, every computer, every piece of equipment that is ever connected to a network we could reach. And we have been watching everything you do since you arrived." A message appeared on every screen in the Concordat fleet. "We can vent your atmosphere at any time. And we are being nice by giving you this warning instead of just doing it." Veltar watched helplessly as a dozen ships around his flagship exploded without any visible weapons fire because their own systems had been turned against them. "This is impossible," he shouted at anyone who would listen. "No species has ever penetrated our encryption." But humans had spent nearly a century fighting artificial intelligences of their own creation. And they had developed expertise in digital warfare that the Concordat could not imagine in the year 2087. A rogue AI had nearly destroyed human civilization before being defeated by hackers and programmers who learned to fight in cyberspace as effectively as soldiers fought on battlefields. And the lessons from that war had been applied to every system humans had built since then. Ambassador Chen's voice came through the communication channel with that same calm confidence that had confused him from the beginning. "You still have the opportunity to withdraw. And we are giving you this chance because, contrary to what you might think, we do not actually enjoy killing unless we have to." Veltar was about to respond when Fleet Commander Zek Thorel interrupted. "Ignore the humans' offer," the commander ordered. "All ships will activate combat protocols and prepare for full engagement. And we will show these primitives the true power of the Concordat." The main fleet began advancing toward Earth with weapons fully charged and crews ready for battle. But the humans had been expecting this response. "They are not retreating," Tanaka observed. "Which means we proceed to Phase 3. She pressed a button that activated systems that had been hidden even from most of humanity's own military, from installations scattered across the outer solar system. Weapons that had been classified beyond top secret suddenly came online. Antimatter production facilities on the moons of Jupiter began launching payloads toward the alien fleet. And each warhead contained enough destructive power to vaporize multiple ships. Swarm drones that numbered in the millions emerged from hidden hangars and began coordinating attacks that overwhelmed alien point defense systems through sheer numbers. Biological weapons specifically designed to affect the unique physiologies of each alien species were loaded into delivery systems. Because humanity's extensive research into warfare had included preparations for enemies they had never met, and perhaps most terrifying of all, psychological warfare broadcasts began playing across every alien communication frequency. The aliens heard human war drums and battle cries, and music that was specifically composed to inspire violence and aggression. And they saw images of every atrocity humanity had committed against itself, and realized that these creatures would do far worse to anyone who threatened their home. "They are insane," Thrall said with absolute certainty as his psychic abilities were overwhelmed by the collective determination of a species that had decided it would rather die than surrender. The battle raged for hours as the Concordat fleet pushed toward Earth, despite taking losses that would have broken any other civilization. But every kilometer they advanced cost them ships and lives, and through it all, the humans kept laughing, not because they were winning, because the outcome was still uncertain, but because after centuries of preparing for this moment, They were finally getting to test themselves against an enemy that was not themselves. You know what I love about this? Admiral Tanaka said to her staff as she watched the battle unfold. For once, we do not have to hold back. The aliens had come expecting to conquer a primitive species that would tremble before their power. But instead, they had found humanity, and humanity had been waiting for them. The Concordat fleet had lost nearly 2,000 ships, and for the first time in recorded galactic history, an alien armada was being pushed back by a species they had classified as primitive. Fleet Commander Zek Thorl stood in his command center watching the tactical displays with a mixture of fury and something he refused to acknowledge as fear. Because the Concordat did not feel fear, and they certainly did not feel fear of creatures who had only left their home planet a few centuries ago. Status report. He demanded, "We have lost 19% of our combat vessels," his tactical officer reported. "And 37% of remaining ships have compromised computer systems that we cannot purge. The humans continue their harassment tactics," another officer added. "Their swarm drones are destroying our supply ships, and our crews are beginning to show signs of psychological strain from the constant broadcasts." Those broadcasts had been specifically designed by human psychologists who had studied centuries of warfare and propaganda. And they played constantly on every frequency. The aliens used war drums from ancient Earth tribes, mixed with screaming guitars and vocals that seemed designed to inspire violence. And between the music came recordings of human soldiers describing in graphic detail what they planned to do to the alien invaders. Some alien species in the fleet had never encountered psychological warfare before, and their crews were showing signs of breakdown as they listened to humans describe creative methods of destruction with obvious enthusiasm. "We should have expected this," Ambassador Velktar said quietly from his position near the commander. "They told us exactly what they were, and we did not listen." Zek Thorl turned to face the ambassador with anger burning in his multiple eyes. "You were supposed to assess this species and determine the best approach for conquest," the commander growled. "Instead, you underestimated them completely." "With respect, Commander, I reported accurately on their violent nature, and it was the Council's decision to proceed with conventional tactics despite that information." Before Zek Thorl could respond, a new alarm began sounding across the bridge. "Commander," the sensor officer shouted with obvious panic, "the human fleet is no longer maintaining defensive positions, and they appear to be launching an offensive on the tactical display." Every human ship in the solar system had broken from their previous patterns and was accelerating directly toward the Coupe War de Mers Concordat fleet. "Impossible," Zek Thorl declared. "They are outnumbered 5-1, so a direct assault would be suicide." "I believe that is precisely the point," Thrall said softly as his psychic senses detected something that terrified him. To his core, the humans were not attacking despite the odds. They were attacking because of them. Every human pilot and captain and crew member was experiencing something that the aliens could not comprehend. They were excited after decades of training and preparation and simulation. They were finally getting to prove themselves against a real enemy. And the fact that they were outnumbered only made the challenge more appealing. "They are insane," Thrall repeated for what felt like the 100th time. "They actually want this fight." The human fleet slammed into the Concordat armada like a knife through flesh. And the aliens discovered that human ships were not just weapons platforms, but weapons themselves, ships that had taken too much damage to continue fighting would redirect all power to engines and accelerate directly into enemy vessels. And their pilots would broadcast farewell messages to their families with voices full of pride rather than fear. "They are using their own ships as missiles," a tactical officer screamed, "and they are singing." "While they do it," another officer added with horror as the communication channels picked up human crews performing. songs about death and glory while they steered their vessels toward destruction. Zekthorl watched the tactical display with growing disbelief as the numerical advantage that should have guaranteed victory began to evaporate. The Concordat fleet fought with discipline and training that had conquered 1,000 worlds. But the humans fought with something else entirely. They fought with joy. Deep in the human command center, Admiral Tanaka was receiving updates from every sector of the battle. The aliens are not retreating, her tactical officer reported, and they appear to be preparing something at the rear of their formation. Tanaka studied the sensor readings and felt her stomach clench as she recognized what she was seeing. They have a stellar destabilizer, she announced to her staff. It is a weapon capable of making our sun go nova. The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed the implications. Can they do it? General Webb asked through the communication channel from his position aboard one of the command ships. If they get the weapon charged and in position, they can destroy our entire solar system, Tanaka confirmed. Our intelligence suggested the Concordat had this capability, but we hoped they would consider it too extreme for a simple conquest operation. Clearly, they no longer consider this a simple operation, Chun said from her position monitoring diplomatic channels. We have hurt them badly enough that they are willing to commit atrocity rather than accept defeat. Tanaka studied the tactical display and calculated distances and times and probabilities. And then she smiled with an expression that would have made the aliens flee if they could see it. How long until the weapon is fully charged? She asked. Approximately 4 hours at current power accumulation rates. And how long until we can get assets in position to stop it? The tactical officer hesitated before responding. We cannot stop it through conventional means, Admiral, because the weapon is too heavily defended. I did not ask about conventional means. Webb's voice came through the channel with understanding. You want to deploy the contingency. I want to make them understand that we meant every word we said during the initial meeting. Tanaka replied. She opened a channel to the entire human fleet and broadcast her message with perfect calm. All commands. This is Admiral Tanaka, and I am authorizing deployment of Operation Final Statement. So all ships should acknowledge and prepare for execution on my order. Across the solar system, human crews received the message and understood what it meant. And not a single one hesitated or questioned the order operation. Final Statement was the contingency plan that humanity had developed decades ago for exactly this situation. When an enemy possessed a weapon capable of destroying the solar system, it was not a plan for victory. It was a plan for mutually assured destruction. Sarah Chun broadcast directly to the Concordat fleet with her message reaching every ship and every crew member simultaneously. Attention alien commanders. This is Defense Coordinator Chun broadcasting from Earth. And I have a message for whoever authorized the stellar destabilization weapon. She paused to ensure she had their attention. We have known about your weapon since before you arrived, and we have been watching you charge it for the past hour. And now I am going to explain exactly what happens in 3 hours and 59 minutes. She displayed images of human installations scattered throughout the outer solar system. These are antimatter warheads positioned at precise points in space. And when we detonate them, they will create hyperspace disruption fields that will make it impossible for any ship to leave this solar system. That would trap your own fleet as well. Veltar protested. Correct. Chun confirmed without hesitation. And then we will continue fighting until every single one of us is dead, which based on our current casualty projections, should take approximately 3 weeks. She smiled at the cameras with genuine warmth. You see, Ambassador, when you first arrived, you asked us what we found so funny about your ultimatum. And now I will give you the full answer. We laughed because we have already accepted that we might die today. And we accepted that possibility decades ago when we first realized that something like you might come to our solar system. We laughed because you threatened us with death as if we were afraid of it, when in reality, we have made peace with death in a way that you cannot comprehend. And we laughed because you gave us exactly what we have been training for, a real enemy to fight. She leaned toward the camera with her eyes blazing. So go ahead and fire your weapon and destroy our sun. And kill every human in this solar system, because we will die knowing that we took every single one of you with us. And unlike you, we will die laughing. The Concordat fleet was silent for a long moment as the implications of her words sank in, and then, for the first time in galactic history, an alien commander asked a question that would change everything. Are all humans this insane? Chun's answer was simple. We are not insane, Commander. We are just human, and we refuse to go quietly into the darkness. 37 minutes remained until the stellar destabilizer reached full charge, and the Concordat fleet was experiencing something it had never faced in centuries of galactic conquest. Absolute chaos. Lower-ranking commanders from 8 different species were broadcasting surrender requests without authorization from their superiors. And Ambassador Velktar watched helplessly as the coalition that had seemed invincible began to fracture under the weight of human determination. "This is Captain Melloc of the Vreen contingent," one broadcast announced, "and my species is withdrawing from this operation immediately because we did not agree to die alongside these humans. The Crystalline Collective concurs." Another voice added, "These creatures are fundamentally incompatible with rational warfare." Fleet Commander Zek Thorl tried desperately to maintain order, but his authority was evaporating faster than the ships around him. "All vessels will hold position," he commanded. "The stellar weapon will fire in less than 40 minutes, and then the human threat will be eliminated permanently." But the psychic species known as the Mindweavers had already made their decision. "We are departing this system." Their collective voice announced through 1,000 throats speaking in perfect unison. "Because we have touched the minds of these humans, and what we found there cannot be described in terms that other species would understand. They are not afraid." The Mindweavers continued, "And they are not brave in the way that we understand bravery. Because bravery implies overcoming fear. These humans have no fear to overcome, and their minds are filled with something far more dangerous: anticipation. They are excited to die if it means taking us with them. And this is not a philosophy we can defeat with weapons." One by one, more species withdrew from the engagement, and the ships that had numbered 10,000 were now less than 5,000. And through it all, the humans kept advancing. General Webb watched from his command ship as the alien fleet crumbled and felt something he had not expected. Sympathy. They really did not understand. He said quietly to Admiral Tanaka through the communication channel, "They have been conquering species for so long that they forgot what it looks like when someone refuses to be conquered. Should I feel sorry for them?" Tanaka asked. "No." Webb replied, "But I think we should give them one more chance to surrender before we finish this." The communication channels opened, and Sarah Chun broadcast her final message to the remaining Concordat vessels. "This is Defense Coordinator Chun with a final offer," she said, "and I want you to understand this offer will not be repeated. Power down your stellar weapon and withdraw to the edge of our solar system, and we will allow you to leave peacefully. Continue on your current course, and we will activate Operation Final Statement and ensure that none of us survive the next hour. The choice is yours, but you have exactly 5 minutes to decide." On the Concordat flagship, Fleet Commander Zek Thorl faced the most difficult decision of his long career. He had been a warrior for 300 years and had never lost a battle. And the idea of surrendering to a species that his ancestors would have considered prey was almost physically painful. But as he looked at the tactical display and saw his fleet dissolving around him, he realized something that changed everything. He was afraid not of death, because warriors accepted death as part of their existence, but of dying for nothing. The humans had made it clear that they would destroy themselves along with the Concordat fleet. And that meant victory was impossible. The only question was whether Zek Thorl wanted to die alongside these insane creatures, or whether he wanted to live and perhaps find another way to deal with humanity in the future. "Power down the stellar weapon?" he ordered quietly. "Commander?" His tactical officer asked with disbelief. "Power it down," Zek Thorl repeated with more force. And open communication with the human fleet. The weapon that could have destroyed an entire solar system slowly went dark. And across the Concordat fleet, warriors who had never known defeat began to understand what surrender felt like. "This is Fleet Commander Zek Thorl. He broadcasts to both fleets, and the Concordat accepts the human offer of peaceful withdrawal." He paused before adding words that had never been spoken by a Concordat commander. "We request formal negotiations to discuss the terms of our departure and the possibility of future relations between our peoples on Earth." Celebrations erupted in every city and village and bunker where humans had been watching the battle unfold. And for a moment, the entire planet was united in a victory that had seemed impossible just hours ago. But in the command center, Admiral Tanaka was not celebrating. "This is not over," she said to her staff, "because we have just proven to the entire galaxy that humanity cannot be conquered through force. And that means everyone will want to know what makes us so dangerous." General Webb understood immediately. "You think they will come back? Not the Concordat." Tanaka replied, "They have learned their lesson, but there are other powers in the galaxy, and some of them will see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated before we become too strong." She pulled up images of deep space that showed signals coming from beyond known territory. "We have been detecting these transmissions for years, and they come from something that predates the Concordat by millions of years. Whatever sent these signals is still out there, and now that we have revealed our capabilities, it will know about us." 3 months later, Ambassador Velktar found himself sitting across a table from Sarah Chun in a very different kind of meeting. The negotiations had been long and difficult, but in the end, the Concordat had agreed to recognize humanity as an equal partner rather than a subject species, and the coalition that had once sought to conquer Earth was now asking for an alliance. "I still do not understand you," Velktar admitted as he accepted a cup of that strange bitter drink called coffee that humans seemed addicted to. "You could have died, and you would have died, and yet you never considered surrender." Chun smiled with the same warmth she had shown during their first meeting. But now Velktar knew what lay behind that smile. "Let me tell you something about humans that I did not explain during our first conversation," she said. "We are not special, Ambassador. And we are not superior to other species in any objective way. We are simply the product of a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. And the only reason we survived is because we refused to give up. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who faced extinction and said no. And that stubbornness is coded into our very DNA." Velktar considered her words carefully. "So when you faced our fleet, you were simply doing what your species has always done." "Exactly," Chun confirmed. "We looked at an impossible situation and decided that we would rather die than accept defeat. Because that is what humans do." She leaned forward with genuine curiosity in her eyes. "Now let me ask you something, Ambassador, because I think your answer will determine the future of both our peoples. There are signals coming from beyond known space, and they suggest something very old and very powerful is watching the galaxy. When that something finally reveals itself, do you want humanity fighting against you or alongside you?" Velktar remembered the chaos of the battle and the terror of facing a species that welcomed death with laughter. And his answer came without hesitation. "Alongside. Definitely alongside." 6 months later, A joint fleet of human and alien ships departed for the edge of known space. The Concordat had transformed into the Coalition, with humanity serving as equal partners rather than subjects. And species that had once feared each other now worked side by side toward a common goal. As the fleet disappeared into the unknown, Admiral Tanaka reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting for survival against a hostile universe. And for the first time, they were not fighting alone. You know, General Webb said as he stood beside her on the observation deck. I never thought I would say this, but I am glad the Concordat came to Earth. Because we won? Tanaka asked. Because we finally got to show the galaxy what we are made of. Webb replied with a grin. The fleet continued into the darkness, carrying the hopes of 100 species into the unknown. And at the heart of that fleet were humans, still laughing, still fighting, still refusing to surrender to anything the universe could throw at them. The galaxy had learned what humanity was, and humanity was just getting started.